June arrived with the promise of summer, and even though it started with grey and somewhat wet days, the flowers were blooming and nodding in the wind. It also didn't really get warm until we were closing towards the end of the month, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. '26 is the year I'm leaning into being an emotional reader, and I have realized that what I feel like reading somehow tend to be connected to the seasons. June is Pride Month, and I was drawn to read books representing LGBTQIAP+, either regarding characters, theme, or both. My first read in June was The Case of the Murdered Muckraker, written by Rob Osler. I had gotten the ARC, or Advanced Reader's Copy, from NetGalley and the publisher in return for an honest review. When I got the book a while ago, I didn't know it was the second book in the Harriet Morrow Investigate series. Since I really wanted to read the first book first, it took me a bit before I got around to reading this book. I would call Harriet Morrow Investigates a cozy mystery series. The books are set in the 1890s Chicago, and our heroine is a lesbian investigator. Harriet Morrow is a 21-year-old young woman and the Prescott Agency's first female operative. This, of course, comes with its challenges, but also its advantages. I don't want to go into more details as I really don't want to spoil the books, but I definitely would recommend starting with the first book. In that way you can follow the personal storyline better. I love following the personal storyline, and to me it was the characters as well as the writing style that made me enjoy the books so much. I'm definitely hoping for a book 3. June, I also decided to puzzle my Rainbow Bookshelves jigsaw puzzle. I bought this last year and it's a 1,000 pieces puzzle. I started with color sorting the pieces and it took me 3 days to finish it. My next read was Game Changer. I've been meaning to pick up this first book in the Game Changers, also known as the Heated Rivalry book series, mainly because my friend Didi over at Virtues of Books has been raving about them. Link to her channel down below in the description box. I picked this up both as a physical copy from the library as well as an ebook from Libby. In mid-June, it was time for this year's Norcon. Norcon is the oldest and longest-running Norwegian science fiction and fantasy literature convention. It took place at the Science Library of the University of Oslo, and guest of honor were Samantha Shannon and Naomi Novik. I have a lovely time, as I tend to do, surrounded by other book geeks and love for science fiction and fantasy books. I even had a little chat with Naomi Novik about the woods and the woods in stories. I kind of wish that conversation had been longer, but there wasn't really time. I went to several panels and talked during Norcon, and most of them were really good. It was so interesting to hear about translations, dragons, and all sorts of geeky stuff. I ended up reading the 3 first books in the Game Changer series in a relatively short amount of time. And had you told me just a few months ago I would be hooked on queer hockey romance books, I might not have believed you. Well, here we are. I think Reid is very good at getting you as a reader really invested both in the characters and the stories. The 3 first books can definitely be read as standalones, but I do think you as a reader get something extra if you start with book 1 and read them in the order they were published. Something I absolutely love about summer is all the flowers that are blooming. I love flowers, and June offered a huge variation of variety, both in color and type. I always walk to and from work, and there really is something special to pass by the beauty they bring. I can't deny the fact that they have an effect on my mood. I always feel happier when nature is so full of life and beauty. As you should know by now, if you've followed me for a while, I'm a librarian and I work in a very old building. The library I work in looks like a castle from the outside, and it's pretty beautiful. It was actually built as a library, and it first opened its doors to the public in January 1906. You probably wouldn't be surprised if I told you this is a listed building, which means we can't do any big changes to it. Even the bookshelves in the library are listed. I know that a lot of people don't really like doing things alone. They don't like traveling alone, they don't like eating out alone, and they don't like going out for coffee alone, just to mention a few examples. I, on the other hand, love doing things on my own, and one of the things that really nurture my mind is the latter. Sitting in a cafe with an oat latte and a good book is one of my favorite things to do, and I often do it after work. Or indeed if I travel solo. For me, it's a way to recharge, and I get really tired from work, especially if I've been talking to people all day. A lot of people think that being an introvert means that you're shy, but that's really not the case. I'm what you'd call an outgoing introvert. I love chatting to people and being social, but as an introvert, that means I use energy doing this. Extroverts, on the other hand, get energy from socializing. So for me, being alone is a way to gain some of that energy I use being social back. Something else I actually like doing, if the weather allows it, is to read while walking to and from work. Having an e-reader makes this fairly easy. After walking the same route to and from work for the last 3 years, I would say I know it fairly well. The roads I walk mainly have little traffic, and I make sure not to wear headphones when doing this, so it's pretty safe. I also make sure to look up regularly to make sure everything is fine. How about you? Are you able to read while walking? Let's come back to my June reading. The Game Changer series is a very spicy series of books. If you followed me for a while, you'd know that I think spice often doesn't add anything to the story. In some of these books, there were spicy scenes that actually added some personality to the characters as well as elements to the backstory. Some could easily have been cut out, but you can easily just browse through that if you'd like. I also like the stories on coming out and how to deal with that. Another thing I love doing in summer is to sit outside on the balcony to read. It can be in the morning with a cup of coffee, if I have time, or in the evenings. One of the advantages of living in Norway is that we have daylight until very late in summers. This means you can sit outside at 10 and it's still as light as at 4. This is also another reason why I prefer summer to winter. and why it's my favorite season of the year. At some point, I decided to take a look at the Queerlit Readathon's Storygraph Challenge prompts. Turned out the books I had read so far in June fit to some of them, and I realized I just couldn't let myself not take part in my favorite readathon. It turned out that one of the prompts was queer sports. Needless to say, the Game Changers books were perfect for this prompt, so I was quick to add them to that. I was also able to add some of them to some of the other prompts. Heated Rivalry, the second book in the series, was perfect for the prompt Messy Queers in my opinion. A couple of the books also fit very well with the prompt Rainbow Cover as they're blue. After finishing the book Heated Rivalry, I was finally able to watch the TV series, which I ended up binging. I really enjoyed it, but I do think the books are better. The readathon also made me read the Cybernetic Tea Shop written by Meredith Katz, as well as A Little Too Haunted by Justin Puella Winans. The first book is a cozy science fiction story, the second is a middle grade horror book. The Cybernetic Tea Shop made me be able to cross off the prompts Ace Spec and Beyond LGBT, and Too Haunted was perfect for the prompts Creepy Queers and Middle Grade. I found the Cybernetic Tea Shop to have the same vibes as A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. There were lots of tea and an AI robot I just couldn't help but fall in love with. I really do hope this gem of a book gets more readers. I also need to look into more books by the author. If I had read a Norwegian translation of A Little Too Haunted when I was about 12 or 13, I'm pretty sure I would have loved it. There isn't a Norwegian translation of this book though, unfortunately. That being said, I still enjoyed reading it. Luna Catalano, the main character of the book, lives with her two moms. They're influencers and flip haunted houses. Or they do, until Luna discovers it's all fake and then blows their cover on a live stream. The moms are very upset with this, as they lose a lot of followers, but Luna is disappointed they faked everything. She also doesn't like that their job means they move around a lot. When they move again, Luna is not thrilled and feels upset by the fact that she thinks her moms care more about their followers than about her, and she doesn't really think this new house is any different to the other houses they flipped. It doesn't take long though until Luna realizes that this house isn't what she expected at all. but how can she get her moms to listen to her? I think this book really pinpoints the influencer parents and the feelings their kids can deal with. One of my favorite walks from work to the city center is along the river. I love seeing the boats and the river ferry while strolling along. Goal is the fourth book in the Game Changers series, and I love that we have another bi-main character in the series. Eric Bennett is also a divorcee and a veteran. He's also older than most of the other characters in the series, as he's 41. His love interest is Kyle, who's 25. Though to many such a huge age gap is problematic or can be problematic, I know that it's not uncommon among LGBTQIAP+ men. I must admit that this probably is my least favorite of the Game Changers books. to work, I was only able to head into Oslo for Pride after work Thursday, the 25th of June. As I had just finished the 4th book in the Game Changers series, I started reading Miss Meteor, written by Anna Marie McLemore and Taylor Macha, on the train. This book has been sitting unread on my shelf for a few years, but it felt like this was the right time to read it. First thing I did after arriving in Oslo was checking into the hotel before having a meal and then heading to Pride Park with a friend. I spent a few hours there as well as several hours on Friday. It was so nice and great to see a lot of people I know. On Saturday, I walked in the Oslo Pride parade. The parade was a very warm but still fun event. Though most of June hadn't been very warm at all, Pride weekend was the warmest that far this year, with temperatures up to 29 degrees Celsius. On Sunday, it was time to head home, but before catching my train back, I had time to sit and read in a cafe. Miss Meteor ended up being my last read of June, and it was a great read. It has an on-page pan main character, which means that I crossed off the See Yourself prompt for the Queerlit Readathon. The book touches on themes like racism, bullying, and feeling like an outsider. But it's also about friendship and about discovering your inner strength. It is beautifully written, and I'm so glad I finally got around to reading it. June was, in short, a busy month, but also a great reading month. I ended up reading a total of 8 novels, which is more than I have read in a long while. And that's it for this video. Please leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, whenever that will be, bye!